So I'm recording. So let's do this. All right.
Let's do it.
Uh, so I wanted to kick off these kind of Zoom weekends, as I'm calling them.
Is
By
that final?
yeah, I mean, we can workshop it. We can bring it to
No,
a Marvel retreat, and we can talk
it's
about it
not.
for 4 hours.
It's not going to get well. Then it'll get worse.
Okay. um, well, I got to keep admitting people. I forgot about that part. More people, more people.
Show up late, you don't get in.
Wow,
Oh,
that's
I don't
Matt
know.
Rosenberg talking, by the way. That's not me talking. I
That's right.
allow everyone in to the room, any room that I'm in. So yeah, I wanted to start this off by talking to my old friend Matthew Rosenberg, because him and I have similar career trajectories, and we're both white guys with beards, and we have so much in common
Yeah.
that it seemed like the best first guest here. And Matt is taking time out of camping to do this.
Yeah, I'm in the woods,
If you
people.
can actually believe it, it's amazing. So thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me. Car just drove by.
Mostly what I want to talk to you about. We'll talk about some Marvel DC stuff, but what's the furthest place from here? I wanted to really
Yeah.
get in and talk to you about this series when it's too late for final order cutoff. So,
I like that.
yeah, give us the synopsis, the basic kind of the elevator pitch of it, just so kind of people are aware before we start talking about it.
Yeah, it's funny. I realized this the other day that like I'm so used to either a Marvel book where like that's the thing is like what you have to go to them with, or
Yeah,
my creator on books where like I was doing it for so long that it becomes refined that I was like, oh,
yeah,
I'm really clumsy at this. Like I'm really, which I think is good. It's probably when I'm at my most honest. It's not bullshit. But
yeah,
um yeah, it's a post-apocalyptic coming of age story about a world where there's no adults, there's just gangs of children, and the
yeah.
world has sort of ended, and there's gangs of children living in the ruins. And it's just a story. We follow a gang who live in a record store, and one
Yeah.
of them, a long lost gang member, returns and whispers a secret to another member, and then dies. And that other member, a young girl named Sid, goes missing, and she vanishes into
Yeah.
the night, and they don't know where she goes. And then they sort of have to decide if they're
Look,
going to go after her, if
I,
they're going
I,
to.
I did not expect you to just tell us everything that happens in issue one.
Yeah, that's the synopsis of the book.
That's a bold marketing move, frankly.
Thank you. Yeah. It's funny because I have to, in the Hollywood of it, uh,
Yeah,
they're
the
like,
Hollywood.
give us the full blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh. And when I start talking about it, like people are like, that's what the book's about. And I'm like, yeah, we're sort of not really telling people what the book's really about. Like it's an ongoing series. So like what it becomes is definitely not the kind of thing we're telegraphing in the first issue or the first few issues. So
Yeah, no, that's smart. Yeah, because the weird thing, especially with image books, I find is you have to have the hook, but you have to have the second or third hook as well,
yeah.
because you can't just give away everything that happens in the first issue, and there's nothing
Yeah.
else, to come along after that. So I don't know if you know this about me. I've been reading manga lately.
I do know that. Yeah.
I'm a
We've
manga
talked a
head
little about
now, huge
it.
fan. Um, and
Manga head is definitely the term.
one thing I've really noticed getting these books on the podcast to read is well, first of all, manga has such a diversity of subject matter
Sure.
that it seems to be missing here. But also, it's like the creators take an interest of theirs and turn it into comics.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so with this, the fact that you've set it in a record store and you immediately have like a debate over Hall & Notes, which Hall & Notes are great, by the way.
Hall & Notes are great.
Was that your starting point? The fact that you wanted to do something that kind of had music as an underlying kind of theme?
No, I mean, yes and no. I sort of always try and do that to a degree. And I really love the connection of music and comics. I always love the pairing and the sort of what each medium offers and what they lack, and how those those offers and the attributes and how they complement each other. But no, I think our starting point was really just that we had this idea that me and Tyler Boss, who draws the book, we did Four Kids Walking to a Bank,
Yeah.
and we started on follow-up book that was just a shitty version of Four Kids Walking to the Bank Again. And we were really
That's a great title, by the way. Four Kids
Yeah.
Walk into a Bank Again. I think
It's
you
not
should
bad.
actually go for it.
It's not bad. I mean, when we're definitely hard up for money, that is where we will return to. But yeah, we just started on this thing that I was just like, it's fucking Four Kids Walking to a Bank with an alien. This sucks. And Tyler was like, no, it's not. And then I was like, take a night and think on that. And he came back and he's like, dude, we're making the same book again. And I think, you know, it sounds pretentious to be like, the thing that I think people liked about the book was that we were sort of exploring new stuff and out of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't realize that, but that's like a lot of what you see on the page of that book is us like really pushing ourselves and trying things we hadn't done before. And so I was like, well, we need to do that again. And we need to like step out of our comfort zone. And so we took a story that was, you know, our spiritual sequel is All of the Stuff Inverted.
Yeah.
And in that, we ended up with this post-apocalyptic dystopian coming-of-age story that is, you know, an ongoing and a huge cast and all these things. And then it felt very distant for me. I suddenly was like, okay, I don't know my way into this. I don't know how I'm doing this. And so the music to me was like a good starting point of being like, they're music fans. That feels relatable to me. There's something I can touch on there. And it feels very, very human and relatable to the audience. But also, it sort of clicked because we early on had this idea that like all of the there's different gangs of kids, sort of like the Warriors. We kind of just ripped that off. But like all of the gangs live in businesses or institutions and sort of take on the personality of that place. So the kids who live in a police station are like, you know, running around beating the shit out of people and enforcing rules that they've made up. And the kids who live in a bank are like, you know, like worship trading and hoarding items that they think have value and like, and so I thought there was something really wonderful. We knew early on that we wanted our kids to sort of live in a place that had no fundamental aid in helping them survive. That they were like, oh, they're around records, they worship records, they want to protect records, and it's like that doesn't help you in the post-apocalypse. And there's something sort of romantic to me about that. So if it wasn't records, it would be, you know, comics or like a video store, but the music element just made a lot of sense.
Yeah, and like there's a bit of a casualness to the characters, like discussing music and kind of a post-apocalyptic future, but it works well because there's context there. This has been going on for a long time, that like one of the main characters doesn't really remember kind of before this.
Yeah, that's a funny thing is like in the book we try and do, I'm a big fan, and I think comics has really gotten away from this for reasons I can never figure out. And like interestingly, I think manga does it perfectly, of like not force feeding you all the details of the world building.
Yeah.
That they're just like, go along on the story and you'll get details. And I think about stuff like, you know, like Lost or The Leftovers or Twin Peaks and stuff like that, where like you don't know what the fuck's going on, and that's part of what keeps you coming back. That's part of the charm of it, is to like try and figure out what the story is and having these new small mysteries and micro details and clues. And so we stripped out all of the exposition about the world, and in that people are like, you know, early on we had a thing where it was like the world ended X number of years ago, and then we were like, let's just not explain that. So people keep going into a post-apocalyptic book thinking like these are children whose parents died in the apocalypse, and it's like, we never say that. We don't. We you know, and there are little clues, like, you know, there's a big one in the first issue that these kids are not from 2 years ago living in normal lives. Like they're a long time removed from the world we know.
Thomas in the chat asks, what about the kids who live in a bar?
Kids can't live in a bar. Bars are 21 plus.
Yeah, so there you go.
No,
that's the perfect answer.
That's the answer. No, we're it's very fun because we keep adding gangs every issue, and they get sort of weirder and weirder as we go, and it's like how these kids interpret what the place they lived was is a fun thing, and like what places they choose to live is a fun part of that. Please
tell me there's kids who live in an adult video store.
There are a lot of different kids you're going to meet. That's
all right. I take that as a yes. Or I get to write that guest issue.
You're the guest issue. Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
let me
cross over it.
let me do issue 7 just the way I did with Donnie and crossover. I should do
If
issue
you
7 of everyone's image series.
everyone's book.
Yeah,
I feel like you're pretty busy, but
this is true.
if you want to do it, issue 7 is yours.
This is true. Well, you're talking about like not having to necessarily explain things immediately on
Mhm.
the page. I noticed that a lot in reading because I read the first couple of issues.
Yeah.
That I really like your Marvel work because you've got a really strong voice for characters. But here it feels there's that, but the difference is you're allowed to let things breathe and allowed to not spell things out. And so I'm just wondering, because you and I came into Marvel at almost
Yeah.
exactly the same time.
Mhm.
What have you learned from writing all those Marvel books that you've taken to this, and what are you attempting to get away from in writing this?
Yeah, I think that's a really good. I mean, like, definitely Marvel made me a better writer.
Yeah,
I can say that without a doubt. Like, just thinking about like a lot of the things of just like pacing and action and giving people the things they need. And I
yeah,
definitely took a lot of those things and threw them out for this
yeah,
book intentionally. That I mean, our first issue is 64 pages because um, you don't get to do a lot of atmosphere in a Marvel book.
yeah,
The audience doesn't seemingly want it very much, or your atmosphere is subtle. Your atmosphere is paired with other things. Your atmosphere is paired with an emotional moment or a quiet moment or like,
yeah,
a fight scene. That's a big truck.
yeah.
I
And
love
is
doing
it?
an interview on the side of the road.
That's brilliant. And there is the thing of like writing 20 pages for Marvel. Like you
Yeah.
really fall into a rhythm doing it,
Oh
which can
yeah,
be
yeah,
really bad as a writer. Uh,
yeah. Uh, yeah, I think we, especially in the second issue, we have like back to back to back double page spreads that are just for like
yeah, I know.
atmosphere and creepiness. And I
They're
was like, yeah,
wild.
we can do it. They're wild. Tyler's an art genius, but like I was like, we can do that. And like we're keeping the price the same because it's just money out of our pocket. It doesn't have to come, we
Yeah,
don't have to answer to anyone. Like Eric Stevenson doesn't call me and go, like, your book actually cost 8 cents more to print because you added 4 pages. Like
yeah,
it's only us, it's our pocket. And so we can do all these things of playing with atmosphere and playing with tone and
yeah,
just giving everything room to breathe. And I like that, and I like the fact that my time at Marvel gave me sort of more conscious control over that, I guess, is the answer.
yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Um, oh shit, what was I gonna say? We got
I
questions
don't
just
know.
kind of popping in the chat too. Oh, I can let people talk as well at some point, but Mike wants to know about the records that will be packaged with the comics. What can you say about those?
Oh, I can say so many things.
So many things.
They're going to be hard to get. Is the first one that we've found out this week. Um, yeah, so basically when the world ended in the beginning of last year, it was a funny thing because me and Tyler announced this book at Image Expo early. We went to Image Expo and it was very funny because like a ton of people there. It was
Yeah,
great. Friend of the room, Jerry Duggan, is there. Like Sam Humphries is there. Like all these buddies, and they're all passing around iPads with like the first 3 issues of their book, the first 5 issues of their book.
yeah,
And I think Jerry said to me, he's like, "Let me read the first issue of your book." And I said, "We've only done 5 pages." Like we literally pitched it to Eric, and he was like, "This is great. Do you want to come to Image Expo in 3 weeks?" And we were like, "Okay." So we just didn't have a book, and we got up on stage, and we were like,
uh,
we're doing this in a weird way. We're figuring it out as we go. Like we know what the end point of our story is,
yeah,
and we know a lot of places in the middle, but like we don't 100% know what it is. And so the book took a longer to get ready, and I had some personal stuff come up and work stuff. And Tyler wanted to go do a book at Dark Horse all by himself called Dead Dog's Bite, which is brilliant and is out now, and people should read. And then in January 2020, I was like, we need to launch. We're going to launch in maybe May or June of this year. Like, let's get ready, let's go.
sure.
And there was a big yeah,
What
there was
what
a big
happened?
well, there's a spoiler for those who haven't been reading newspapers.
Hmm.
Um, we got real panicked when the pandemic hit, and
Yeah.
we're like, this is not like, are there going to be comic shops? Are there going to be comic publishers? Will people be killing each other with spears? Like, is there a point in doing this? And so we tend to be optimistic about the world,
Yeah.
and so we said, okay, let's take a break, let's restructure the book, let's work on it more, let's make it something that'll make people really excited about picking it up in a comic shop. Like, let's figure out how to make
Yeah.
this a cool thing. And so the first thing we did was make all the issues longer and rewrite some stuff, but then I was like, we should do records, we should put out records with this.
Yeah.
And I knew that every band in the world was stuck in their house and not touring and not able to do anything. So it was a horrible time for them, but an ideal time to hit them up and beg for songs.
Yeah.
And so we just reached out to a ton of bands that we love and that like we listened to while making the book and influenced us. And we're like, do you want to do songs for 7 inches? We'll press them up, then we'll give them back to you. I'm not trying to like become a record label or own your music.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make money off it. We're donating all the money from those to charity. And we're really lucky. So the first one is a band called Joyce Manor from Southern California, who I love. We're just like this great power pop band. And the title of the book is taken from a line from a song called Jawbreaker, who are a band called Jawbreaker,
Yeah.
who are one of my favorite bands of all time. And when we were started working on the book, I reached out to Blake Schwarzenbach, their singer, and was like, hey man, I borrowed this line from you, I hope that's okay. And he was so kind and awesome and enthusiastic that when the discussion of doing the 7 inches came up, I was like, I reached out to him and was like, would you be into this? And he was like, yes, this is a really cool idea, give me a week to think on it. And a week later he sent me a song. He just like emailed me and was like, what do you think of this? And I was like, yeah. He's like, I recorded in my house, I'm stuck in my house, like, let's go.
Yeah,
and so that's the
awesome.
first 7 inch. And yeah, we're doing one for every issue. If I don't have a heart attack.
Up until a certain point, right? Like, is this a mini series or is it ongoing?
No, it's an ongoing book. We're doing up until a certain point.
Matt,
no, I don't know. I don't know what the point is. We were gonna do just the first arc, and then two of my favorite bands of all time were like, yeah, we'll do a song. And I was like, oh, that would be issue 7. And so now I'm like, do we end at issue 7? I don't know. I don't know what it is gonna be.
I mean, when Matt Fraction and myself started doing the XXX variants, we were only going to do them basically to start an arc.
Yeah.
Just because
and then they were popular.
Well, no, I mean, what actually happened was we wanted to make sure that you couldn't see through the bags, and they had to be like hot pink because we wanted them to be hot pink, but with the hot pink bags you could see through. So they had to be bagged in like black bag and then the hot pink bag, and to do that we had to order like something like 25 grand worth of hot pink poly because no one uses it, right? This is the thing. This is the big difference between Marvel, DC, and then Image. Is that Image, like, you're on the hook for all of it. You have an idea and it's a fun idea. It's like, okay, well, now how do you do it and what are the logistics of it? So like we just owned pallets and pallets of hot pink poly, and we're just like, oh, we need to use this because we just bought it all. So we need to do these XXX covers. It's ludicrous.
It's ludicrous. When we're doing our own variant for conventions, but we're not going to conventions, so I guess we're just going to sell them online. But we did our own, and it's just a cover Tyler drew, and I was like, I emailed Image, was like, what's the stupidest shit we can do with this? And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, just like glow in the dark black light hydro foil, like just tell me what the absolute dumbest thing we can do is. And they were like, oh, you could have it embossed, a foil cover that's embossed. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. And then like when they came back and they were like, for the amount you're doing, it's going to cost you around $16 a copy of the book.
And we were like,
and we were like, wait, what? And they were like, yeah, you should really only do this when you're like doing like 5,000 or 10,000. They're like, doing 100 doesn't make any sense. And I was like, maybe we'll do them at $16. And then Tyler, that's one of the times that Tyler stepped in and was like, stop. Like, I'm going to answer this email. You stop. So when we reveal our cover, it won't be embossed. But yeah, like we were shocked. And they were like, they make a plate and you have to pay for the plate. And that plate is like you're
Yeah.
buying that. I was just like, oh, it's so weird because yeah, when we see stupid stuff on our books, like we never think how much it costs or who greenlit it or like any
Yeah.
of that cost benefit analysis.
Did I tell you
Uh,
about when Fraction and I did the sketch variants, the secret
oh
sketch variants?
yeah, you told me this.
It's well, I'll tell the other
Yeah,
people this in case they don't know. The first, our idea was for issue 11, we were going to polybag them all and hide a $500 bill in one of them.
which
That
is
was going to
awesome.
be our big thing. Or in like I think 10 of them, we're going to have like 5 grand worth just out there.
So good. It's so
And
good.
so the problem with that is it is in direct violation of state lottery laws. You can't do it because it's a lotto, right? It's like I'm buying a
Yeah,
thing, instead of scratching it, you're opening it up and there's a $500 bill inside. There's also something about transferring the money. It would have to be a golden ticket. It was a nightmare. So we decided, well, we'll do special sketch variants. Huge ordeal. We're going to do 1,000 sketches on blank covers and then seal them up with all the regular covers, and you might get one that's a sketch. So Matt and I, we had to fly to Virginia to the printer plant where they set them all up in the boardroom, closed the plant for the night, locked us in there, and we just started drawing. And we had a lot of fun, but we quickly realized we're running out of time. Like this is bad. Like we're just doing dumb Batman and Spider-Man dick drawings on these things. And so we went and grabbed dinner, and then we hit a dollar store and bought some like Disney stickers and Marvel stickers. We were putting Marvel stickers on them and just trying to make it as fast as possible. We worked until like 8 in the morning doing this, but our flights were at like 10. It was like insane. Like we left bleary-eyed. We flew back to our respective homes. We were kind of posting them on Tumblr, I guess, at the time.
Mhm.
And I got home and I climbed into bed and I just checked my email, and there's an email from Eric Stevenson at Image saying, "What the fuck are you guys doing? Did you just draw Batman on hundreds of Image books?" And I was like, "Oh no." It was starting a whole legal thing where like our lawyers were just like, these are people can't buy them knowing that it's Batman
Yeah.
or Spider-Man on it, so that's not the draw for it. Like you don't know what you're getting. There's like laws about like secondhand copies of things, or it's just fine art. But Eric and the Image lawyers were not having any of it, so they had to reprint them again, and they sent us 500 each to do sketches of like public domain characters. So like it was like Moby Dick on like so many of them, and the rest were just standard dick drawings.
Oh,
It was just a nightmare because we had to double pay. We had to pay for the new
yeah,
copies,
that's so good.
and like all the ones that we couldn't sell were shipped to Matt's parents' house in like North Carolina, and they were just like in their garage.
Oh
We
god.
gave some away at like a Sex Criminals fan meetup, but yeah, just the logistics and the cost of it is just wild.
we
Um,
we
but
print we printed up a retailer version of What's the First Place from Here, and it's the normal book, but when you open it, there's like a little letter from me, and then there's a 9-panel cartoon that Tyler drew that I wrote. That's just the characters of the book talking to retailers. And at one point, it's like one of them is like, like Matt and Tyler did this because of this, and one of the other characters goes like, "Who the fuck are Matt and Tyler?" And so
yeah,
like one of our characters is like, Tyler because he did this and Matt did these things, and Tyler drew it so that it's like Matt wrote Matt wrote X-Men, and Tyler drew an issue of Department of Truth, and now Matt writes stuff at DC like Grifter, and Tyler drew the background characters, and uh, their faces are the Department of Truth character, the lady with the X's on her eyes, and Grifter. And then one of the characters, I was like, what did you do here? I don't even know. And he's like, well, I was gonna draw Wolverine, but I just felt bored, so I just cut and pasted Hugh Jackman's face onto it. So in the retailer copy, like it's just got Grifter and Department of Truth characters and fucking Hugh Jackman in it.
oh,
And I
that's
was like,
amazing.
that's questionable legally, but we're not selling it, so fuck it. And here we are.
It's that punk music attitude that got you where you are today, you boys.
Yeah, that's the
Before
best.
I open it up to other people questions, I want to talk a little bit about us when we came into Marvel and we
Yeah.
did our first Marvel retreat, because it was you, me, Kelly Thompson, Donnie Cates. We were the 4 new people at that
And Ed
retreat.
and Brisson.
Oh, and Ed. I always forget
Yeah,
about Ed. He's so quiet.
he's
Um,
quiet.
what was your biggest memory from that retreat?
I have 2
Okay.
that are a really good one and one I won't maybe share.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just among
the
friends.
sure, this is just the internet.
Yeah.
The good one was I was super nervous, and I was always nervous in those. Like I always just felt like I was going to say something really stupid, which I tended to do. But beforehand I get nervous about it anyway.
Yeah.
Uh, but right before it started, I think like Brian Bendis um, took me aside, and he's one of my heroes and just like one of my favorite writers. And he took me aside and he was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I was like, "I'm good." And he was like, "Are you nervous?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm super fucking nervous." And he was like, "You're here because they want you here, because you've earned your spot here. It's not a popularity contest. It's based on the work, and you're here because you deserve it, and you deserve to be here as much as anyone." Not true, but a very nice thing for him to have said. And
Yeah.
he was like, "So defend your ideas and call out bullshit, and just know that it's your room as much as it's anyone's room." And that was like really good advice for me, and I felt really good. I never felt the desire to defend my ideas so much,
Yeah.
for a bunch of reasons, but I felt good about like having a place there, because
Yeah.
otherwise I think I would have just been like, "Oh, I'm like sitting next to Mark Waid, and like Ta-Nehisi Coates is there, and Bendis, and Jason Aaron, and all these people that I like, that are very intimidating from a distance and are actually incredibly kind up close."
Yeah.
That was the good memory. The bad memory, I will leave the person nameless.
Okay.
I'm
I'll
sure
fill
you'll know
I'll
who
fill it in.
you'll know who it is. It's not going to be confusing. uh we had this we broke for lunch on the second day maybe, and we'd been discussing like all these really high concepts, and it was really exciting and really smart. And we broke for lunch, and everyone was going to get up, and I was like about to get up from my chair, and I was like, "That was really fun." And the writer sitting next to me said, "Yeah." And he said, "These things are always fun. Every writer in here thinks they're writing The Wire, and the audience just really mostly wants The Big Bang Theory." and and I couldn't get up from my chair. I sat through lunch just sort of staring off into the
Oh
abyss of being
God.
like, and it felt really true. It felt really like,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's true across the board. I don't think there's anything that is like a universal what a Marvel fan wants. I found
Yeah.
that there's very different things, but I think in general, like we would all approach these things like this is the highest of high art, and we are, the masters of craft, and there's no one better than us. We're the Marvel writers room. And a lot of times people are just like, a lot of the audience is just like, who beats up who in this one and why? And like that's
Yeah.
the discussion. Just like, how did the Hulk win this fight? That doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. You're an idiot. And like
Yeah.
that's the conversation that people want to engage with. So it becomes this very fun thing. But that
Well,
quote
yeah.
has always stuck with me.
I mean, those readers are they just happen to be the most vocal because they've got those ideas stuck in their head and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
just have to get them out. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's yeah. I don't think it was meant as a true quote, but it was meant as a good here's one to chew on for a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
instead of going to get lunch, instead of going to go eat an empanada.
Yeah. I really like that Bendis said all that to you, though.
Yeah.
He said the opposite to me. He said, "Are you
Why are you
nervous?
here?
You should be. You don't
Mhm.
belong here. You just need to sit down and shut up." Which, fair.
He's right. He's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
No, he's a smart man.
All right, so I'm gonna open this up to questions. I believe you can like raise your hand. There's probably a button to raise your hand. So no, Matt, no.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I was showing them.
or yeah, I don't really know how to do this, so maybe that's a problem.
Chip, should we talk about your book?
Nah, I guess.
Because it's on FOC on Monday and everyone should be ordering it because it's really, really great.
Yeah, yeah, I'll mention at some point. But Evan Cool Guy. Oh yeah, so Paul Peterson just wrote, hit reactions in Zoom to raise hand if you want to.
Oh. You started to read a question.
Yeah, sorry. Evan Cool Guy says, what happens when you're paired with an artist whose work you just don't like? Matt, you can take this first.
Oh, good.
Has that ever happened?
It has. I won't name names. I find worse than being paired with an artist whose work you don't like is being paired with an artist who you don't get along personally with. I feel like I very much am of the belief that like I have a weird view of the way comics work, and I'm sure it's very different than you. But I write very detailed scripts because I see it in my head. I'm very visual in the way I write. So I write detailed scripts, but I tell everyone I give a script to, like, this is just how I see it in my head. Like, do whatever the hell you want. Like, interpret it and whatever you think, however you think this works is cool with me. And so I very much step away when I turn the script in, and then I come back to like make sure that the story fits with the art and that everything is smoothed out. And but I'm not very possessive of the art. I'm not very like, and my idea of collaboration is not that it's a team effort every step of the way, but that it's actually like stages where it's someone's entire process themselves, if that makes sense. And so art I don't like, I've always been like, well, that's their look and that's their interpretation. And like, there's been things that have come in. There's been things that have come in that are like, yeah, that's not what I wanted it to look like, but that's fine. But like a lot of times things come in, most of the time when I write a thing, like when art comes in, I'm like, oh, that's much better than what I had in my head. That's great. But when it's a person you don't get along with, it becomes a very painful, awful process. I've been very fortunate that that's only happened maybe only twice, that there's been someone where I was like, I really don't like this person. We don't get along. They probably don't like me. It's possible that a lot of the artists don't like me, but
that's the big thing. I'm 100% sure most of my artists don't like me, but
I mean, you're very hands-on, right? When you with the visual.
I can be. I mean, when it's needed. If I'm working with a newer artist who is just getting things wrong, you know, I definitely go in at the layout stage and I gently guide them. In some places, I'll show them how to draw a thing. Like I like sometimes the artist is so new they might not understand perspective. Which is a weird thing to say about a Marvel or DC artist, but sometimes that's just the case, especially perspective in terms of the human body. So I'll be like, okay, this is actually how the body would look from this angle, and I will sketch out how it's supposed to look. And like I've never
seen you do that.
I've never had anyone push back on it. And there've been some cases where editors are like, oh, you've made them a better artist, thank you. So I feel like, you know, there's some value there. In terms of like artists I don't like personally, that hasn't really happened. The closest that happened was I got teamed up with an artist who I love. I just love their work. And I asked them, what do you want to draw? They told me. I'm like, great. I wrote a script just for them and the things they want to draw. And then every email I got was just like such a downer. Just like about themselves, just about life and about work in general, and they're tired and blah blah blah. And I was just like, oh my god, like it's just sucking my energy out. And like, you're my art hero. But then I also realized, which is something I always remind any writer friend of mine who's dealing with an artist, is that artists aren't writers. So even in something as simple as an email, you can get an email from an artist who'd be like, what is wrong with them today? But really, they're just, I mean, I don't want to make artists sound dumb, but they're, you know, hunting and pecking the keys to get the information across, sending it. And they're not like being verbose or being subtle with necessarily the language that they're going back and forth with. Like, sorry, I just gotta see if my mom's still on here. She, for some reason, was on here. Okay, she's not. I can say this. I
don't know if that was a bit.
No, she was on here. She direct messaged me, said, hi, son. I'm like, oh, geez, mom. I said, oh, so what was I just talking about?
Artists and the bummer emails.
Oh no, but there's something else. Oh, what did I? Oh no, yeah. So the day that my parents joined Facebook, I realized they don't know how to write.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Beca-
yeah.
And I didn't know that before because I assume
Uh-huh.
my parents are just smart people, and I have no
Yeah,
idea
yeah.
that they don't know how to communicate through writing. But then I see the things they're posting. I'm like, what are they like 90 or 12? Like I can't tell from what they're posting. Um, so I take that. So I take artist emails and correspondences with a grain of salt as a result of that,
Yeah.
because like sometimes they're just not. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I had a thing the other day, and I love Tyler Boss, who he's one of my closest friends, and I love him to death. And he wrote and drew and colored and lettered Dead Dog's Bite at Dark Horse, and is like, whatever. And when he started doing it, I was like, oh, I guess we're never going to work together again, because like, dude is a great writer. Like, dude
yeah.
tells a story really well on his own, doesn't need me. And
Yeah.
I was so happy and supportive of him. And then when it finished, he was like, all right, he's like, I'm so fucking happy that that's done. And I was like, why? And he was like, I just like drawing, man. He's like,
Yeah.
writing is exhausting. I don't like it. He's like, I'll probably write something again, but I don't want to do it for years. Like, it just burned me out. It's not
Yeah.
fun. It's not a good way to do things. And I was just like, oh, that's really interesting, because I always sort of assumed that like the drawing was the exhausting part and the writing is the vacation part. And it just,
Not
and he was like,
necessarily. Yeah.
yeah.
Somebody has their hand up, so I'm going to ask
Oh,
them to unmute, and I'm going to do a whole thing where I'm going to add them as a spotlight.
let's
Oh,
do it.
fancy.
Mike, how you doing? What are your questions for myself or Matthew?
Yeah. Uh, Speaking of like the artists, so like I read Daredevil.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So does my actually. I'm a bad parent. I've got my kids here, but my Noah, he reads Daredevil too with me,
I
but
don't think
Oh
that makes you a
wow.
bad parent,
Hey
Mike.
Noah.
he reads more mature comics. But
Ah,
so my question was like the primary artist. How do you say his name on Daredevil? Marco Cicchetto.
I will always get his the pronunciation wrong. People tell me it's Chichetto, and I always do Coquetto, but yeah.
So like when he's obviously like amazing, but when he's
Mhm.
not available, and you have to have like a guest artist or whatever for an issue or two, like does Marvel give you a list of people or they just tell you who's going to be on there? How do you pick this?
They usually they give me a list. Uh, Early on when we were kind of far ahead, it would be sometimes they give me a list and I would reject everyone on the list, and then we'd go back and then I get another list. And um, uh, though now I think the turnaround times are just so quick,
yeah.
um, because they're swamped because they're not in their offices anymore and everyone's working separately and they're short staffed. So sometimes I can deliver a script in like April, and they don't assign an artist until like July,
Mm.
and like it's kind of last second. So uh yeah, because they have a roster and they want to sometimes, especially with the film artists, they want to give you people who are at a certain level, but they need help kind of getting up to the next level, and
Mm.
the only way to do that is to draw pages.
Mhm.
So those are the cases where I tend to work more closely with the artist to make sure that they kind of rise to that, right? Because it's discombobulating for the reader
Mm.
to all of a sudden have a different style artist on the book. Though I do recognize that some readers can't tell the difference, which is also kind of blows my mind. The things that seem really obvious to me, I'm just like, what? They don't know Marco didn't draw this issue. Um,
Yeah, it
so
always kind
yeah,
of bothered me, like when I was a kid, especially like when the primary artist would be interrupted with a guest artist, I'd always get pissed. Uh,
I know,
it's
and
just,
it always feels like a bait and switch, especially if the artist does the cover. Like,
yeah,
yeah, that's so awesome. Like
he
Marco,
does all the covers, is that right?
yeah, he does all the covers now. We launched with Julian Tedesco, and then Marco wanted to do the cover, so we paired him with Matt Wilson on colors. But that's the thing. I remember as a kid, like my favorite artist would be on the cover, and I'd open it up, and it's like, well, it's not that guy, and
Yeah.
that's unfortunate. But we just put out so many issues, like Daredevil put out like 16 a year, I think, at this point. Not to mention specials and things like that. And then the event, Devil's Reign, like Marco was like, I want to draw every issue of that. I'm like, okay, well, we got to start soon. So we started like a long time ago to make sure he had the runway. But because of that, we're just juggling artists on key issues of Daredevil too that normally Marco would draw, and it does make it tricky as a writer. I sometimes have to just kind of like, okay, all right, this is good. I have to let it go. It's not Marco. It's not going to be Marco, and that's all I can do.
One other quick thing I want to mention, and then I'll get off. But
yeah, no problem.
Was I really like the? I know both of you guys are on the Batman Urban Tales. Is that right?
Urban Legends. Yeah.
Legends.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's
I
been
really
great.
loved the story you did with Red Hood.
Oh, thanks.
And I noticed that artist, is he going to be on your new book, Matt?
Eddie Barrows. Yeah, we're doing launching Task Force C, and
I sent Matt like a text when I found that out, just congratulating him, because Eddie is one of the best artists I've worked with, and so professional, and like he's a guy where you just don't have to give him any notes. Maybe he'll misread something in a script and you'll have to be like, oh, it's not supposed to be a knife, it's a gun or whatever, but his layouts are inventive. His pencils are so detailed. Like I kept asking DC to put out like a black and white edition, because like they're just gorgeous, and the inks are fine, but they kind of kill his work a little bit on the page. How have you liked working with them, Matt?
It's been amazing. Yeah, I remember when because they were like, oh, we're really gonna go hard on this book, and I've been really lucky at DC, because like I got there and they've just been pairing me with like just dream artists, where they're just like, oh yeah, David Lapham, and you were gonna do something, Chris Sprouse, and you were gonna do something. Like it's just nonstop, like been wish list and artists for me. And then they were like, it's Eddie Barrows, and I was like, that's really great, and I was excited, and like, but I wasn't prepared for like how amazing he was. Like I'd read his stuff always and been like, it's really cool, and I was reading your thing, and then you texted me and were like, wait, are you working with Eddie? And I was like, yeah. And you were like, you're so lucky, man, he's such a dream. And like you sent me that, and I think 2 hours later he sent in his first pencils for his first cover, and I was like, this is one of the best covers I've ever had on anything I've ever worked with. And I just was like, great. I wrote him a note and I was like, Eddie, this is so beautiful. And he's just been amazing. Like I don't think people, especially for doing like a weird horror book, which is what we're doing. We're doing like a horror superhero book. And he's just like having like, you can tell he's just having a good time drawing just like monsters and people eating each other and stuff. But they're just, the pencil work is just unparalleled. Like if he's not a superstar in 2 years, like the audience has failed him. Like he's just that good. His name should be in the top of upper echelon of artists.
If it wasn't like a weird conflict of interest, I try and get him on Daredevil. All right, thanks, Mike. I'm gonna go to another question here.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
No problem. All right, my friend Mike Perlman, bringing you in. Unmute, Mike. Mike.
Sorry, I was having
there you go. All right.
trackpad problems. Sorry about that.
Don't we all? I see you're wearing a Sexual Gary shirt.
I am, just for you. It barely fits, but one of the 5 people that bought them.
Yeah, exactly.
So how's it going?
Going good. You?
Good. Hey, Matthew.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. My wife is from Buffalo, like your friend Tyler.
Oh, yeah.
So enjoy your stories about him in Buffalo when I hear you on podcasts.
Oh yeah, I was just up there for 9 days in his basement.
Oh, well, I haven't been back in about 5 years. My wife was raised there and took her out of there about 25 years ago. But we don't get back often enough. But Salem's hot dogs, I can't. I still have them shipped in. So
nice.
And we still go to Bills games here in Atlanta. There's a couple of bars that host Bills games, so she drags me out to those for some Labatt's Blue and hot dogs and beef on wax. So,
sure,
very good. So Mike, what are your questions today?
So what I want to know, Chip, is I see behind you have a lot of art, and can you tell me what's about some of the art behind you and some of the arts that you get originals from?
All right, well, let's see if I can do this without losing anybody. I'll do a quick, just a quick tour. All right. So I have a page from Joe Canonis for Howard the Duck issue 1 that he gave me. It was Actually, no, I think I paid for it, but still.
I have one of those as well. Yeah, those are great pages.
Just a random Archie page I picked up after I did a signing at a shop once. This thing, which is amazing, it's the history of rap by Kagan McLeod, my Kaptara artist. On the back is like small biographies of every single one of the characters. A Sean Phillips Incognito page, which is kind of the first page of original art I bought. Erica giving me a Jughead. This next one's probably my favorite thing ever, which is Walt Simonson, who's my art hero, did a cover of Jughead, like a variant cover. And I know, it's just so great. And so I emailed him. I'm just like, oh, hey, can I buy that? I'd love to buy it. He's like, I'll give it to you. And he just sent it to me with like sketches and all the preliminaries. Like, he's such a nice dude. Yeah. This is a drawing of me as a 5-year-old from my uncle back when I was going into kindergarten, who was the other artist in the family. Some quick ones here. Twin Peaks painting by Veronica, which I love.
Actually, I have the prelim of that one.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of kind of like old illustration work from an artist named Will Davies, a Canadian illustrator. This is a Marvel 2-in-1 page from Jim Chung, which also on the back of it is all the preliminary drawings. He light boxes. He draws it in reverse on the back first, which is weird. A few other things. Kagan McLeod, Phil Collins. So yeah, Matt, I'm a bit of a music fan myself. What else? Sex Criminals print. Oh yeah, this Kagan's like my favorite artist. So I've also got an old man Magneto from him. It's great. Yeah, I've got a few other things kicking around, but those are kind of the main pieces.
Cool. So Matt, do you collect any? Do you have any art from your artists? Or?
As you can see behind me, I live in nature.
That's all. It's just nature.
It's just here. I don't have earthly possessions. I live off the land. No, I don't collect original art because I have like an addictive personality, and if I realized very early on that I was like, if I start doing this, I won't be able to have a house to put the art in. I will immediately just be like, oh, I need these pages. So I own one page. I own a page that Brian Bendis drew for Jinx that hangs above my mantle next to a Adrian Tomine print that is my favorite of his work. And then I have a couple like panels and strips from things that me and my girlfriend have that are like panels from an Anders Nilsson thing that I gave her from his book Big Questions. Nice. And my girlfriend is a big Mark Bayer fan and got me into Mark Bayer. I liked Mark Bayer when I was a kid, and so we have a few Mark Bayer like strips that he used to run in his newspaper strip for back in when they were in like alternative weeklies. But yeah, not conventional like pages. No, it's just the Bendis page is the only thing I have.
Yeah. Actually, I've been begging Brian to try to get his cover from your book, and I'm still negotiating.
That would be awesome. The Tyler's always trying to give me pages, and he's like, just take a fucking page, and I'm like, no, I want you to sell them. I want people to have them. I don't want to be on this path.
It's a path for sure.
Yeah. Chip knows I'm a little obsessive as well. I'm
I
own a little too much is my way to say. But
I don't know how you could not. I don't know, like there's so much art that I love.
Yeah.
That I don't know when I would be like, okay, that's good, I'll stop. Like I'd always just be like, just why wouldn't I own there's another book I fall in love with every week. I would definitely want to own pages from it.
Yeah, like Chip knows, I'm always begging for the few times he does draw and have so a few rare. Pages that he did. It is. I've got that Batman piece you did, and the one issue you did of Sex Criminals. I got 2 pages from that. But
my one traditionally drawn issue of Sex Criminals. All right. Thanks, Mike.
Anyway, thank you guys.
Move
Appreciate
on to the next person. Just going to remove the spotlight. But first, I just wanted to say my memory from the first Marvel retreat. Ties into original art because I just remember meeting Donnie, and Donnie was so nervous in that first retreat. He felt like a puppy dog. Sometimes he'd like say something and kind of get a little newspaper in the nose, and he'd just like retreat. But when he pitched Venom, I sat there thinking, I should buy all the original art from this because it's going to be a hit. Like, and then just as like a total commercial capitalist move, just buy all the art and retire on it.
Yeah, and the guy who drew that book, like, where's he now?
Exactly. All right, I'm going to spotlight. All right, Evan, unmute yourself and ask questions.
Thank you, guys. First of all, thank you both for giving me some wonderful entertainment.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, man.
Can you tell me a little bit about the pitching process at Marvel and DC, and if you have any memorable ones or ones that got rejected or anything like that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've got one that usually the way it kind of would work for me is they would ask me to pitch on a thing, and then I would pitch, and then I would start writing it. On Star-Lord, they asked me to pitch, and they let me know that they're asking for multiple pitches, which is like a bake-off, and I said, well, that's okay. I don't want to do that, so that's fine. And then 2 weeks later, the editor emailed me. He's like, "You're the only person. Please pitch." So I'm like, all right. But I had when Joe Canonis and I were wrapping up Howard the Duck, we were done that story, so we were just like, okay, let's just end this here. I think it makes sense. But we had an idea, and we actually gave a hint on the final cover of Howard the Duck that we were going to do a Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends series, where it's going to be Joe and I doing. It was going to be like Spider-Man, Howard the Duck, Iceman, Firestar. And we had this like whole pitch and stuff, and like I don't know why they didn't just go for it. I think they were just worried about Spider-Man saturation or something at the time.
When have they ever been worried about that?
I know. It's I kind of like, yeah, I forget how it fell apart, but it was the first time something I'd pitched just didn't go. I was like, oh man, that sucks. But then I got Star-Lord like immediately after that, which got canceled after 2 issues. So I was doing real well.
Well, I like.
Thanks. Matt, how about you?
The two that stick out in my mind are, one was I think it's the best lesson I ever learned about corporate comics was I was at my local comic shop. I was at Midtown Comics picking up my books, and I see Jordan White, the editor, walk in, and like I'd met him a couple times. I knew him, and so I was like, "Oh, hey, Jordan, how's it going?" And sort of like reintroduced myself. He's like, "Yeah, how's it going?" And then he was like, "These guys?" And he pointed, and behind him were Cullen Bunn, Jerry Duggan, and Jeff Lemire. And I was like, oh,
sure.
Okay. And they were there for like a mini summit. And I was like, what are you guys all doing here? And they were like, oh, we're here because Charles Soule is signing here. And I was like, no, they don't do signings here. He's signing at the Midtown Comics downtown. And they were like, no, he's here. And I was like, no, he's not. Like, look around the building. Like, he's not in the building. He's downtown. And they were like, fuck, how do we get? And I remember Jerry just being like, how long is it going to take us to get downtown? And I was like, I don't know, like, you hop on the train, you'd have to transfer like probably 45 minutes. And they were like, yeah, fuck it, we're not going to do that. And they were like, all right, we're going to go get drinks. And we'll text Charles and he'll meet us after. And so I was like, oh, it was nice to see you guys. And then Jerry grabbed me and he was like, hey, come for drinks. And I was like, no, I don't want to intrude. And he was like, and I hadn't started working at Marvel or anything. Or I'd done like a one shot, I think. And Jerry was like, no, come for drinks. Like, this is good for you. Like, come, I'm inviting you. And like, Jerry, very sweet. And so I went out with them and went out for like an hour, didn't want to overstay, but stayed for like, 45 minutes or an hour, and then, thanked everybody and left. And the next morning at 10 in the morning, Jordan called me and he was like, hey, do you want to write Rocket Raccoon? And I was like, yes, I do. And it was a Tuesday morning. And he was like, and I was like, oh, thank Jerry. I owe Jerry forever, like my hero. And Jordan was like, okay, do you think you could have some ideas to me by Friday? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna kill this. I'm gonna just absolutely crush it. And so I was like, I have ideas. And so like we got off the phone at like 10:30, at noon, I sent him 5 ideas. I was like, here's 5 ideas for what I could do with Rocket.
Yeah.
And he jumped back on the phone with me. He's like, wow, that was so fast. And he was like, I really like this idea. Do you think you could write it as a full pitch? And I was like, yeah. And I like got off the phone. I was like, I got to do this. And I wrote it by the end of the day and was like, here's my full pitch. And he was like, that's great. He got back to me and he's like, that's great. He's like, do you think you could have an outline of all the issues by Friday? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I got to keep this up. I got to keep it up. So I stayed up all night and wrote a breakdown of all issues in the miniseries. It's five issues or 6, I don't remember, of the mini. And I sent it to him first thing Wednesday morning. So when he came in, it was in his inbox. And at noon, he wrote me back and was like, had some notes. And he was like, this is great, though. Do you think you could have the first issue script in by Friday? And at that moment, I was like, how is this possible that you wanted an idea by Friday? And I've just been so far ahead that now it's the issue. And I did. I killed myself to get the first issue done by Friday. But that was a good lesson on like, don't over deliver in comics. Was basically my first lesson in comics was don't over deliver. But the other pitch idea that is sort of a favorite of mine, I think speaks a lot to my career. I did Phoenix Resurrection at Marvel, and that was like Axel Alonso, who was editor-in-chief at the time, was a big champion of the book. He was a big champion of me, and he put me on it, and then they really liked it, and it did really well, and it got good reviews. And when the second issue came out, like he called me up and was like, come in and let's grab lunch or whatever. And I came in, or maybe when just the number, I don't even know if the issue, I think the first issue had come out or something, and the numbers were good. And I came in and he was like, hey, you did good. He's like, we threw you in the deep end and you did good. And I was like, thanks, Axel. And he was like, so, I'm here to ask you, like, what do you want to do next? The world is yours. And I was like, I'd love to do a multiple man series, like just a mini series about multiple men.
The world's your oyster, man.
And he like the look on his face, he was like, and then he was like, I don't think you understand what I'm saying. Like, you can say anything. Like, we're gonna try and get you something good and juicy and big. He's like, you could do New Mutants, you could say X-Force, you could say X-Factor, you could say an X-Men title. Like, what do you want? And I just looked him in the face and I was like, look, you're always going to need a New Mutants book. You're always going to need an X-Force and an X-Factor and all that stuff. Like, I have a chip here, right? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, I'm not going to play a chip for something you're going to need anyway. I'm going to play the chip for something you're not going to do unless I have a chip to play. I was like, I want to do multiple man. And he just sat there and he stared at me. And then he just went, fine, you'll do a multiple man book. And that's why I did the multiple man book.
That's awesome.
And the audience reacted roughly the way Axel did and was like, why is there a multiple man book? Like, it's pretty much the universal question there, but it is one of my favorite things I did there. So take from that what you will, I guess.
That's amazing. Thanks for the question, Evan.
Thank you.
Much
so much,
appreciated.
guys.
All right. No more raised hands, but there are plenty in the chat. I'm just going to try and hit a couple here.
Did I ever tell you my story about Kagan, since you are buddies with him? And what my Kagan story is it's not a particularly good story, but I really loved Infinite Kung Fu when it came out. Yeah, just great. And my first book I did was that I did a book with the Wu-Tang Clan with RZA and Ghostface from the Wu-Tang Clan, and I was at dinner with RZA talking about stuff, and
that's crazy. But anyways,
I was like, and RZA was like, talking to me about Shang-Chi comics, and he was like, how come they can't make a Shang-Chi comic work? It's so obvious, like, it's so easy, just there should be a Shang-Chi comic always. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, when was the last time there was a good kung fu comic even? And I was like the TV show? He's like, no, just any martial arts comic. And I was like, oh, this book Infinite Kung Fu is great. And he was like, yeah. And he's like, I'll check it out. And I went out and I bought him a copy of it, the big, the big tome. And next time I saw him, I was like, hey, this is the book I was telling you about. And he was looking through it and he's like, this is beautiful. He's like, this looks amazing. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, this guy should draw an issue of our book. And I was like, okay, I'll hit him up. And I emailed Kagan and I was like, hey man, like, do you want to draw an issue of this book I'm doing with RZA and Ghostface? And he was like, oh, thanks so much for reaching out. And then he was like, I got a weird question. Like, can you prove that you're working with them? And this isn't something weird. And I was like, that's a fair thing to ask. And then I was like, yeah, how do I prove that? And I like called RZA's manager and I was like, I need something that says that this is an official thing. And he was like, no. And I was like, what do you mean it is an official thing? And he's like, I can't give you that right now. We're not announcing the project. And I was like, no, it's not an announcement of the project, but just like something that says like, yeah, I'm Riz's manager and I work with him. And he's like, yeah, we're not announcing the project. I can't give you anything. And I was like, but it's like, you guys have spent thousands of dollars. I've heard the record. Like, we have all this art. And he was like, yeah, I can't do it. And I was like, okay. And I went back to Keegan and I was like, hey man, I can show you art for the book. I can tell you that like we're in talks with publishers. I can tell you things, but I can't actually get you something official. And he was like,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
man, that's kind of weird. I think I got to pass. And I was like, I totally understand. I totally understand passing on that. It is real weird. They're real weird. But yeah, that was my Kagan story.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm supposed to talk to him later on today, so I'll bring it up. And the fact that it was actually Riz.
Yeah. I mean, look, the book was a little bit of a disaster, but it had beautiful art on it.
Yeah.
So he dodged a bombshell of a production nightmare.
Would have been fun.
But
all right, just looking at the questions here. Paul asked, since both of you move between creator-owned and work for hire as architects too, can you contrast the experiences from your POVs?
Yeah. It's funny. I told this story the other day, but I'll tell it again because why not?
Yeah.
When I was coming up, I used to when I first realized that I wanted to make comics, I would voraciously read interviews with creators, and especially like, that certain crowd of like the Marvel architects of the time. I was like such a fan of when I was like trying to break in, of like Brubaker and Matt and Bendis and Kelly Sue and all those people. And they just kept always getting asked questions about like, is it different doing the creator owned and the work for hire? And they would always be like, yeah, it's like a completely different set of muscles. And I remember always seeing them answer that and always thinking like, what an incredibly pretentious thing to say. Like I would just be like, it's just storytelling. Like stop acting like it's just writing comics. And then when I started doing it, I was like, oh yeah, no, it's totally different. It turns out those people who had the job that I wanted knew what the job was and I didn't. But yeah, I think it's very different. I always say it's sort of the difference between like doing work for hire is like getting in a car and you have a roadmap and a place to go. And you're like, well, I could turn here and it's 2 minutes longer. I could go this way, but you have a destination. And doing your own book, doing creator own work is like just getting in a car and driving. And you're just like, I don't know where we're going to end up. I don't know how this is going to go. Well, like we can wing it. We can go any direction. And I said that to someone and they were like, wow, sounds like doing creator owned work is terrible. Or doing work for hire work is terrible. Like you got a roadmap and they tell you exactly where to go. And I was like, that's not terrible. That's the way that 99% of people use cars. Like when you get in a car, usually you know where you're going and how to get there. It's just like very rarely are you going to get in a car and be like, I'm just going to drive and find out where I go. But it is a weird difference and weird. I don't know. I just think there's something terrifying about not having a roadmap, and it also freeing, and you sort of have to embrace that. Is how I always view it.
The Fraction always said to me that writing for Marvel was like writing a continuous second act.
Yeah.
Like you're joining the story kind of midpoint, and you're turning it along, but you're also not resolving it. Like because those stories are never meant to be fully resolved.
That's what when I wanted to write comics. My dad was a writer. And I went to him and I was like, I want to write comics. And he was so heartbroken. And he was like, comics? And like, he just didn't get it. And he was like, I have a literary agent. I have a TV agent. Like you can meet with them. You can talk to them. And I said, what's your problem with comics? And he said, comics isn't storytelling. And I said, of course it's storytelling. What do you mean? And he said, a story is a very simple thing. A curtain goes up, you meet a character. When the curtain goes down, that character's changed. And he said, how is Peter Parker a different person in your life than he was in my life? And I was like, no, it's a different thing than that. And I had to give him comics to show him, like, this is what I want. And he got it. But like, I understand that analogy for sure.
But it's a funny thing because like your dad wrote for TV.
Yeah.
Which has a similar kind of constraint, right? Like.
Yeah, but he hated writing.
Okay, yeah, he just didn't want you to hate your career like he hated his.
Yeah. He loved writing novels. He liked writing TV movies. Okay, he hated writing network television because he was just like, it's nothing. It's like, he was like, "You're going to do the same grind as me, but get paid at 1/150th." And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds cool."
Yeah. A fraction also said to me once that writing for Marvel is like basically being in a cover band.
Yeah.
Like you can put your own spin on it, and you could be like, oh, the cover of this song is like my favorite version of that song, but it's still the cover song. And then you go off and write you just start your own band, and it's harder because you don't have the nostalgia and already the love for the song that was being covered. Like you have to start from the ground up and like basically try to break in again.
Yeah. I think that's a funny thing for Matt to say, being that he I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Grunwald Hawkeye, but like Matt and David's Hawkeye is about as much as you can redefine a character as is possible to do at the big two. And like, you know, so it's coming from him. That's an intense thing to say.
Yeah. I mean, he did say that, I think, pre-Hawkeye. So maybe maybe he's changed his mind on that a bit. Let's see what else we got here. Paul Peterson says, Chip, do you therefore, this is from earlier, therefore think writers may be more business savvy for their comic career than artists, perhaps, i.e. in negotiating deals or making pitches? Could that be why it's primarily writers making Substack deals? I think there's a bunch to unpack there. Like in terms of like the Substack stuff, it's hard for an artist to do more than one thing at a time. Like that's the big problem there. The Substack deals are going to comic writers because I can still write 3 Marvel books and a DC book while also having 2 books that I'm writing and one I'm drawing for Substack. That's just like that's just a labor issue. Though I am stupid and I am drawing the one Substack book. I think because writers have so many other kind of projects to juggle, they have a lot more choices to make. And because you have more choices to make, you have more kind of career planning to do. Artists, if you lock onto a book, like, you know, we talked about Donnie and Ryan before, like Ryan was the Venom artist. That was his job for like 2-3 years, right? But that's it. Like, you know, he worked like 10-hour days on that because drawing comics is like the most labor intensive art job you can have. But meanwhile, Donnie could like do that, but he can also do all these other things. And it's hard. It's hard for artists to like manage a career when like you get locked into a thing for so long, which is why a lot of comic artists just do covers or do conventions and just kind of do random things or shorts once they hit a certain level, because it's so tricky to be locked into one thing. And also the writers get more credit on the project, so that's got to be really hard too. Like on Sex Criminals, like I never minded that. Like Matt and I kind of presented a bit more as a team, which I think happens naturally on image books. But even still, like, you know, Matt would get more credit on Sex Criminals, even for things that I was doing or coming up with. But he also got all the blame. Like that's the other thing. Like a writer will get too much credit, but they'll also get too much blame, and it shifts more greatly with the writers than it does with the artists. Like if you like my art, you're gonna like it from issue 1 through to issue 20 or whatever. Like your ideas about my art aren't going to change unless I have a drastic change in quality. Your opinion's not going to shift, but you could read Sex Criminals and Matt's story, and then there could be an issue just like, oh, that issue just fucking sucks. That issue's amazing. Like,
which issue are you talking about specifically?
I think we all know. No, but like that's the trade-off there. Like an artist can, like, you know, kind of ride a certain plateau, and the writers will just be bouncing all over the place.
I also think, you know, there's a couple things that play there. One, there's always an interesting thing because people view comics careers as what they see on the page. And it's like, well, this script, and like so much of the debate when people are like, well, writers and artists and this and that, and they're like, so much of the debate is like, this person put this in the script and this person put this on the page. And it's like the artist's job didn't start and end at, you know, the what you see on the page, and the writer's job didn't start and end on the script. And it's like, and in the same way that like a lot of writers are visualizing and conceptualizing things before there's artists attached, a lot of artists are doing character design work and world building stuff that you're never seeing. But beyond that, like just in the business sense of it, like artists get paid better because it's a much more time sensitive job and much more time consuming. But artists also have secondary income a lot of time. They can sell pages, they can do commissions, they can do all these things. Writers then are doing, you know, like if an artist hypothetically is paid 4 times what I'm paid, people are always like, well, you can write 4 times as many scripts as they can write. And it's like, well, I can sort of, not necessarily, but like it's all about just trying to maximize revenue streams, because none of us are paid what we're worth.
Yeah.
None of us are making, you know, if we were in other industries and other mediums. So like you see a lot of artists where people are like, oh, you know, they're not that business savvy, they just draw this book, and the art and the writers out there, and it's like that artist is probably doing character design stuff, or like doing illustrations for some movie company, or like designing a shoe. Like there's so much stuff that people don't see in a career. So I don't think it's safe to say like, oh, the artists are less business savvy. I think the writers name gets out more, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a better sense of business savvy. It just equates to the differences of the kind of hustle that they have.
Yeah, and it's just they have to make more decisions. That's all. Like in terms of like projects to take and not take, and what to do and where to go, and and you know, we talked earlier just about like artists who make the switch to writing, and how some of them are just like, oh no, I can't. That's not for me. I think a lot of it is that like there's a lot more kind of decision making process at that stage. Like I can draw almost automatically. Like for me, drawing at this point is just like it's almost relaxing, unless I find something that I stumble on. I'm never stuck on a drawing. I continuously get stuck on scripts.
Sure.
Nick Palmieri wrote, Chip, what have you been consciously taking from your manga splaining reads and incorporating into your own work? I've noticed a slice of life manga influence in public domain, and I'm curious how much of that is conscious. Yeah, I mean, public domain is a direct result of the manga splaining podcast. You know, when I was talking to Matt earlier, just about you know, his love of music finding its way into the creator-owned work. That's definitely, I had almost like kind of an emotional crisis once I realized that manga was like people taking the thing they love and then turning it into manga, you know, whether it be food manga or ping pong or whatever, because I started to think about the things I love and I don't have anything. Like all my friends have hobbies and things they collect and things that they enjoy. Like I've got friends who are into synthesizers and guitars, or like old jazz records, whatever. And I don't have anything like that I'm passionate about except for comics. So I was just like, that actually kind of depressed me for a bit, because I'm like, oh, I'll never have like that kind of comic book where it's just like I'm taking this love and turning it into comics, and it'll be a fresh new thing for the world. But then I just realized, like, well, my thing is comics. Like, I love the business, I love the stories, like all the books, the nonfiction books I read, you know, are usually about the history of comics and interviews. So yeah, public domain was kind of a direct result of that. And also, yeah, like the slice of life stuff and kind of the relationship stuff in manga that you can have over multiple volumes, that's going to come into play more in public domain once we kind of set the table. Because I really want it to be a book about like introducing characters and seeing which ones kind of click as I write it. It's the freedom of the creator own versus, you know, the Marvel DC. You can't just kind of like have characters kind of pop in and disappear and see what works and what doesn't work. Like you kind of have to like, you know, run stuff by people. So yeah, I mean, it's a definite influence. Mike also asks, Matt, you mentioned in the off-panel podcast that you used to produce records. Do you have a story from that life that you can share?
Oh man, yeah. I didn't, you know, produce records is not, we did actually, in any other industry that is the correct term, but actually produce records, people think that means that I was a record producer, which I was not. I ran a record label. So I manufactured records, but I wasn't the guy who manufactured them. That's the pressing plant.
So what the hell did you do?
Yeah, it's one of those jobs where you're like, I wrote checks to people. Like I wrote checks to people, and other people were supposed to write checks to me and then didn't. And that was my job. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was all, I mean, it was basically like I got out of school and just immediately hopped in bands and started touring the world and trying to be around music as much as possible. And I love putting out records. It's always funny to me because the comics people are always like, oh, the comics industry is so brutal and like anything you say about the comics industry is in the music industry is like 100 times, and it's in every direction, where you're just like, where people are like, the ego's in comics, and it's like, no, like ego's in the music business. And people are like, you know, like I remember someone just being like, there are so many like sexual predators in comics, and there are a lot, and it's really disheartening. And then you're just like, oh no, it's like I've been in a room where like retroactively I'm like, oh, I was the only person in there who wasn't like, who shouldn't be in jail right now. Like just really like horrific stuff, but also like just the like exploitation and the weird like the rip-off stuff and just everything that you think about in comics is in music is just heightened. It's just a bigger medium, but it's very similar. So like I sort of felt very prepared for comics, and that's why I do a lot of the dumb stuff I do of like how I market my book and how I push my stuff, and doing sort of like a lot of hands-on stuff, because I did that and I feel very comfortable in that. And so like that's not a specific story, but like a takeaway is just that like when I got into this, I was like, I'm never going to be the best writer in comics. Like
that's the attitude.
I mean, you know, set your expectations realistically. Like, come on, like there's nothing I can do that's going to make Alan Moore not have written comics. I'm working on it, but we're not there yet. But like, I was like, I can try to be the hardest working writer in comics. That's something I can control. And like, there's some things that are innate skill, innate ability that you're born with. And I don't have a godlike writing ability, but I can put more time into my day and work harder. So that hustle, it comes from the music industry stuff. But in terms of like specific stories, I don't know. Like, you know, there's a lot of just like weird, you know, fighting Nazi skinheads in Alabama at 2 a.m, and then them showing up in the same Waffle House as you and trying to buy you dinner. Like,
we've all been there.
We've all been there. It's just most of it's just like touring with bands and like, you know, staying and, you know, not having a place to stay and sleeping in a parking lot and waking up to like the SWAT team because they thought that you were going to blow up the Walmart you're sleeping in, and you're just like, it's just 7 dudes sleeping in a van. Like, we're not terrorists.
Nothing weird
like,
here.
Nothing weird there. Like, you know, like it's a lot of that stuff. Crossing borders and on tour in Europe, and my very stoned guitarist being like, they're raiding the bus, and us being like, what are you talking about? It's just a border. Like, it's just, we're just showing them passports, and him flushing all of his drugs down the toilet to the point that the toilet then overflows into our bus with just like drugs everywhere, floating out of the bathroom while we're all just sitting there. And the border people just being like, okay, you're going into fucking Switzerland, like, we don't care. Stuff like that is fun and horrible and stupid.
Yeah, there's not enough of that in comics.
There isn't.
No,
there isn't.
Matt, you've been very generous with your time, especially since you're camping. So I'm gonna let you go, and I'll stick around for a few more minutes and make it a free for all here.
Well, thank you for having me, Chip. This was a pleasure.
What's the date that the comics on sale? What's the furthest place from here? Issue number 1.
So many mosquitoes out here. It is on sale November 10th in comic shops everywhere. When's your book out? Well, you know, I don't know.
New Burn number 1 is out November 3rd.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So don't pick it up November 3rd. Save some gas. Pick it up November 10th, and you can get both our books.
Yeah.
That's not good advice. That's not real advice. But no, I'm really excited about the book, and thanks to everyone who came and listened to me ramble. And thanks for having me, Chip.
It's a pleasure. I'll see you, man.
See you, buddy.
Bye.